Husband started parroting dog whistles without realizing it. Last night, I had one of those moments that completely threw me off guard. My husband, the one I always thought of as progressive, started parroting anti-LGBT commentary without even realizing it. It was one of those times where you're listening and something just doesn't sit right, but you're too stunned to process it fully in the moment. To say I was shocked is an understatement. He's usually so supportive. He's the type of guy who not only does the lion's share of the housework, but also takes on over half of the childcare responsibilities. At this point, he's the primary breadwinner, while I'm juggling full-time school and 2 part-time jobs, neither of which offer the flexibility his job does. His profession as a massage therapist means he's around a lot of nurses and first responders, most of whom he's worked with in his previous career, so he really gets them. He's always been vocal about his support for LGBT rights, especially since his sister and childhood best friend are both part of the community. For him, it's not just a casual support, it's deeply personal, and that's why hearing him say what he did was so incredibly jarring. I watched as his fingers furiously clicked on his game controller. He's an avid gamer, and while I don't pay much attention to what he's watching, I know he's mostly into streamers who are dads or who offer balanced reviews. Nothing that screamed red flags. In fact, he actively disapproves of certain content like the tater tot and manosphere stuff. He's had his own struggles with mental health and has little patience for anyone who trivializes that, so when he's watching something, it's usually thoughtful, or at least not overtly harmful. But last night, as we were sitting on the couch together, he started going off about a new game that had just come out. He was frustrated with how the developers had shoehorned in gay characters whose entire identity, as he put it, was just being gay. "I'm tired of all this corporate pandering to the LGBT crowd," he muttered. My heart dropped. This was the same man who had always been so supportive of LGBT people, the same one who had stood up for his sister when she came out. And here he was, sounding like he had bought into all the anti-LGBT rhetoric I thought we had moved past. I had to say something. "Is the character in question a baby gay?" I asked, using the term I knew from my own experience as someone who's bi. A baby gay is often someone who's newly out and tends to make being gay a huge part of their identity, at least in the beginning. It's a phase many of us go through, especially when we first find the freedom to express ourselves. To my surprise, he had no idea what I was talking about. He looked at me blankly, almost like I'd spoken in another language. That's when I realized how disconnected his perception was from the reality of LGBT experiences. I tried to explain that many newly out individuals, particularly those who have been closeted for a long time, might initially focus heavily on their sexual orientation because it's their first chance to embrace who they are fully. But over time, they settle into a more rounded identity, one that includes but isn't defined by their sexuality. "I went through that phase as a bi person," I told him. "It's pretty common for people to adopt a one-dimensional personality during certain periods in life. We all go through phases." But he insisted that the developers didn't do that with the character. "No, they just made the character one-dimensional, and that dimension was homosexuality," he said, sounding frustrated. "It's annoying, and I'm just sick of it." He went on and on about how he was tired of seeing LGBT characters being reduced to their sexual identity, and how it felt like a shallow attempt to tick off some diversity box. By now, I was genuinely baffled. I know my husband well. He's never been one to enjoy first-person shooter games like Call of Duty, which is all about action and shooting. He prefers games with complex storylines and strategic elements, RPGs, tactical games, where the narrative and the characters are well developed. I raised an eyebrow and couldn't help myself. "Really? You're annoyed by gay characters? The ones that have depth and story arcs?" He looked at me, slightly defensive, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. "Well, yeah, just the ones that make being gay their entire personality," he said, clearly trying to justify himself. "Really? And what about the other one-dimensional characters?" I pressed. His response was quick. "Well, I don't like them either. It's bad storytelling." This is where things started to unravel. "So why are you telling me you don't like LGBT characters, but you're not criticizing the other one-dimensional characters?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Because, dude, that sounds like something you heard from Twitch. Where did you hear this?" "Why would you say that?" he asked, a bit defensive now. "You realize you sound like you're against gay characters, right?" I shot back, giving him the space to recognize what he was saying. "No, I'm not against them," he replied, but there was a bit of hesitation. "I'm just against the ones that are one-dimensional." "And you think they'll get better at writing complex gay characters by skipping them entirely? Or do you think they need to practice and mess up a few times to get it right?" I could feel the frustration creeping in, but I held my ground. Well, they're just going off a DEI checklist, he explained, as though that was enough of an explanation. Why bother if they're just hiring outside consultants to fulfill corporate pandering? At that point, I felt my patience snap. Oh my god, you did not just say that, I responded, trying to keep my composure. He paused, his brow furrowing in confusion. Okay, what did I miss here? He genuinely looked confused, not angry, but I could tell he was wrestling with his thoughts, and I tried to make him understand the situation by turning the tables on him. You're a white cis dude. You can find someone in any movie that looks like you. I love martial arts. Do you realize how hard it is to find a character who looks like me in an action movie? I continued, the words spilling out now. Do you realize how amazing it would be to actually see a woman with realistic proportions kicking ass? He started to backpedal. Well, there aren't guys that look like me. Any white, curly-haired, kind of beefy guy, I snapped. Chris fucking Hemsworth, Chris Pratt, Jack Black. Oh, he replied, slowly processing. I guess they kind of look like me. Well, kind of. I pushed further. Can you think of a single female action star who looks like me? Well, no, he admitted. I felt a shift. Okay, so take that back to your gay video game characters. Who do you think is behind these one-dimensional gay characters? He had an answer, though it wasn't what I was expecting. Well, they're bringing in DEI consultants for it, he said. So I guess it's the DEI consultants who are behind it. If not, they'd make the game more complex. Don't you think it's weird that none of the developers have enough personal experience with gay people to do it themselves, without the DEI consultants? He paused. Well, no, they shouldn't need one, they should just write better. This is where I pushed him even further. Really? You think this group of heterosis white game developers would be able to write a better, complex gay or female character without some help? Without a DEI consultant to guide them? His face shifted as he processed my words. Wait, no, he said slowly, his voice quiet now. I guess not. They don't have the lived experience. I could feel him finally understanding the point I was making. Exactly. Do you really think that a bunch of these guys are going to magically create a complex, well-written LGBT character on their own? Especially with all the issues we've heard about Blizzard? He sighed. Yeah, they're claiming that, but now that you put it that way, I could tell he was realizing the flaws in his thinking. So either the DEI consultant is necessary and they mess up before they get it right, or they should have more women and LGBT folks doing the writing, right? He seemed to finally get it. Oh, damn. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if they can't write these experiences themselves without those checklists, that makes way more sense. It was a long night, and even though the conversation took a bit of a turn, it made me realize just how deeply these ideas can sneak in, especially when you're not paying attention. Today, he started going through his YouTube, Reddit, and Twitch histories, trying to figure out where he had absorbed these ideas. He didn't even realize how strange it was until he took a closer look. He's a good guy, though, and he listened. He acknowledged it, apologized, and told me that he was glad I pointed it out. We were both shaken by how insidiously these ideas had taken hold, but I was proud of how he handled it. Update 1. I'm really struggling right now and could use some advice on how to handle a situation with my dad. He's generally one of the good ones, though from an older generation with views that, while well-meaning, don't always translate well to the modern world. I've always had this feeling with him that, while his words can sometimes miss the mark, his heart is in the right place. For example, he'll occasionally refer to women as females, which, even though it's awkward and outdated, I knew he meant it without malice. There was this one time, though, where he used the word colored, while telling me a story about a black person who overcame something truly horrible and racist, and how much he admired their strength. He was trying to tell me that he was on their side, but I had to swallow the discomfort that came with his choice of words. Earlier this year, my mom passed away, and it's been tough for all of us. But what's hit me hardest is watching how my dad is coping now that she's gone. She was always the rock in our family, the one who kept everything grounded and made the big decisions. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that she wore the pants in their relationship. Even my dad, who, for all his strengths, always seemed a little bit intimidated by her. She was tough, and people respected her for it, including him. It's hard to put into words just how much she shaped all of us. I've been doing my best to honor her legacy by forging my own path. I'm currently working on my career in entomology, and I've always tried to follow in her footsteps, being strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. But just 3 days ago, I got into a heated argument with my dad that completely threw me off. I had been venting to him about something my brother had said, something sexist, of course, and instead of doing what he normally does, which is sort of brushing it off with a, "you know your brother," or something along those lines, this time he actually defended my brother's views. He said, "Men are problem solvers, and women just want to talk about their emotions." I could feel my blood boiling. My mom would never have let him get away with something like that. She would have called him out in a heartbeat and set him straight. To hear my dad, of all people, agreeing with such an outdated and frankly hurtful perspective, it cut deep. The thing is, my brother, for better or worse, has become a full-blown Trump supporter, largely influenced by the internet, and I've seen how it's affected our family. It's like he's a different person now, entrenched in this political bubble that feels impossible to break through. But what scares me the most is how my dad is slowly getting sucked into the same kind of mindset. He spends so much time online, and he's easily influenced by all the AI-driven, sensational content out there. My dad is not the most media-savvy person, and without my mom there to guide him, I'm really worried about where this might be leading. He's always trusted her judgment, and now, without that anchor, he's drifting further into spaces that make me uncomfortable. I've tried to have conversations with him, trying to gently nudge him in the right direction, but it's hard to change someone who's set in their ways, especially when they don't even realize how far off track they've gone. The hardest part for me is that I see these shifts happening, but I don't know how to fight back without alienating him. He's still my dad, and I know his heart is in the right place, but I'm terrified of the direction things are heading. I'm caught between trying to educate him and protect the relationship we have. What can I do to help him without making him feel like I'm attacking him? Update 2. It's hard for me to admit, but my mom, despite being an incredibly intelligent woman, has fallen victim to a lot of the propaganda circulating these days. It's honestly quite heartbreaking to see how someone so sharp, who's always been able to discern the truth from the noise, has started to believe things that are just wrong. The worst part is, I can't even really point to one thing or one source. It's a gradual shift. I've watched her go from being someone who could hold her own in any intellectual conversation to now parroting things I know aren't true, and it's painful. I keep reminding myself that she's still the same person, still the woman who taught me how to think critically and challenge everything, but it's hard when those same lessons are now being ignored or worse, twisted by the things she's consuming online. Take the other day, for example. She said, "Fluoride is actually a neurotoxin." I couldn't even hide my surprise. She had always been a voice of reason, someone who would question sensational headlines or sketchy claims, yet here she was repeating one of the most common misconceptions spread by anti-science groups. My heart sank, and I had to remind her, albeit maybe a bit more sharply than I should have, that she needed to use her critical thinking skills, something she had always been so good at. I explained that while fluoride can be harmful at very high levels, the fluoride added to water is well within the safe range, and it's important for protecting children's teeth. I even gave an analogy, telling her that it's like saying salt is bad for you. Sure, excessive salt is dangerous, but we need it in small amounts to function properly. Or magnesium. Overdose is harmful, but it's essential to life. It wasn't a perfect analogy, but I hoped it would make the point clear. Sadly, I doubt it's working. I wish I could say that every time we talk about these issues, I see the gears turning in her head, that I'm making a difference, but I don't. It's like trying to break through a thick wall of disbelief and stubbornness, built from layers of misleading information and paranoia. I keep trying to approach these conversations with patience, reminding myself that this isn't her fault. She's just fallen prey to the same kind of misleading narratives that so many others have. But each time I try to bring some logic back into the conversation, I can feel myself losing ground. It's tough, because I know how strong she is, how capable of change she can be, but this is different. It's like watching someone you admire fall into a trap that you know they can't get out of on their own. I feel this overwhelming sense of sadness and frustration whenever I try to reason with her, knowing that the person I'm talking to isn't the one I remember. This isn't the woman who raised me to think critically, to challenge everything that doesn't make sense. It's not that I don't love her. I do, more than anything. But it's hard to see her being misled, even though I understand how easy it is for someone to fall down that rabbit hole of misinformation. She's so smart, so capable, and I know deep down that if she had the time and resources to really look into things, she would see the truth. But now I'm just hoping that if I keep gently reminding her to think critically, maybe, just maybe, she'll start questioning some of the things she's been told. Though deep down, I wonder if it's all in vain. Update 3. In some strange way, reading your words here brings me a sense of reassurance. though I can't ignore the underlying fear that creeps in with it. There's something unsettling about this shift I'm witnessing, particularly among the men I know. As a white woman, I've been noticing this change for a while now, and it's honestly hard to ignore. It feels like a lot of the guys around me are all suddenly saying the same things, parroting the exact talking points they hear from right-wing sources. It's like talking to a Fox News anchor or a parlor influencer. It's not even about the facts anymore, it's just about repeating these recycled, inflammatory opinions with all the conviction in the world. They inject little jabs here and there at various groups whenever they can, and somehow it all feels so rehearsed. It's their voice, but it doesn't quite sound like their own ideas. Even if they say it with all their heart, you can tell that something's off. It's not something they've arrived at on their own, it's something they've been told to say. What strikes me most is how deeply ingrained this ideology has become in their sense of self. For them, defending these views isn't just about intellectual debate, it's an attack on their identity. When you challenge these points, it's almost as if you're personally attacking them. It's like they've tied their entire worth to these beliefs, and anything that questions them feels like a direct assault on who they are as people. The defensiveness is almost instinctive, and trying to reason with them only makes them double down harder. I can't help but feel that these men have been hit so hard with this kind of rhetoric that they can't even see the damage it's done to them. They've been so deeply influenced by this onslaught of misinformation that their worldview has become rigid, closed off, and fear-driven. The fear is palpable. It's like they've built this entire worldview around the idea that they're under siege from some external enemy, the boogeyman of the moment. And in turn, they've become more self-righteous, more certain of their beliefs than ever before. It's almost like watching someone who's been brainwashed, but they're completely oblivious to it. The way they cling to these beliefs, despite all evidence to the contrary, is both heartbreaking and infuriating. It's like they've swallowed this entire narrative without questioning it, and now it's become their truth, an unshakable truth that they're willing to fight for, even if they don't fully understand why. This transformation is so stark, so surreal, and it's hard to watch. I never imagined that the people around me, people I've known for years, men who once seemed so rational and level-headed, would fall into this kind of mindset. It's almost as if they've been swept up by a current they can't escape from, a current of fear and anger that's being fueled by these echo chambers of misinformation. It's unsettling to think that these men, who once valued independent thought and critical reasoning, have become so enmeshed in their beliefs that they can't see how far they've drifted from reality. In a strange way, though, I think OP is incredibly fortunate in that her husband is different. He's receptive, he's curious, and perhaps most importantly, he's willing to examine himself, to question his own assumptions and beliefs. I wish more people were like him, willing to engage in self-reflection instead of shutting it all out. There's hope in that, even if it feels like a rare exception. Because if someone can be open to change, there's always the possibility that others can be too. But the difficulty lies in getting them to realize how deeply they've been affected by all this misinformation, and that's no easy task.